Hey guys, this is Uruzi. This is season 2 of What If Naruto Was the Son of Apollo and also part 10 of the series. The summer after the quest for Artemis, Naruto has his hands full with guilt, concern and frustration. When Bianca's strange illness takes a turn for the worse, a quest is started. A relationship is strained, a hero returns, and the labyrinth is found. Join Naruto as he begins his quest for the cure and the others dive into the labyrinth. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and also check the author in the description if you liked the story. I don't want to make you wait any longer, so let's start. Chapter Chapter 7. Naruto reached down and picked a rock up, chucking it at the fleeing group of teenagers that had drove by and hit him with a water balloon, sons of bitches. Ah, come on Naruto, it's not that bad, Taliah said between her laughter while next to her Piper had broke into peals of laughter. They had been walking for a good 10 minutes when the jeep full of teenage guys rolled up alongside them, hooting and hollering. Naruto told them to buzz off, and in retaliation they threw a water balloon at him. Not that bad. Taliah-chan, look at me. Naruto gestured to his crotch angrily, I look like I pissed myself. Taliah rolled her eyes while Piper bit on her lip to try and stop her laughter at the older teen's predicament. The raven-haired demigoddess patted her disgruntled and embarrassed boyfriend on the cheek. Leaning in, she whispered, why not dry it off, hot stuff. Naruto's angrily furrowed brows relaxed as he mulled over her words and he blinked before groaning and covering his eyes with one hand. Dragging the hand down his face, he muttered incoherently before he smiled at his girlfriend and cupped her face in his hands. After breaking away from a kiss on the lips, Naruto whispered to her, I knew there was a reason I kept you around. Smirking at him, Taliah stepped back and put a hand on Piper's shoulder. The younger demigoddess, a bit embarrassed from watching the couple kiss, gave her a confused brow. In response, Taliah just said, just watch. You'll see. Naruto cracked his neck before clapping his hands together and then said, okay, haven't had to heat myself up in a while. Here we go. Closing his eyes and tilting his head back, Naruto dropped his hands to his sides and relaxed his body, letting his chakra flow speed up and heating his body. Piper opened her mouth to ask what he was doing when she saw it. In a blink of the eyes, the blonde demigod became a living being of golden light. It was different from his god mode, not blindingly bright, but just enough to accent his sun-kissed skin tone as well as heat up his body, enough to the point that his pants immediately dried and looked good as new. Opening his still blue eyes, Naruto was the first to see the gobsmacked look on Piper McLean's face. Wow! The young demigoddess uttered. She looked up at Taliah before looking back at Naruto, your boyfriend is hot. Taliah faltered for a moment, prompting Naruto to grin as he lost his glow. He then vanished, the light bending around him and his clothes. Piper blinked and started to look around for the teen only to swivel around when Taliah made a noise of surprise. She was shocked to see Naruto hugging Taliah from behind with a roguish grin on his whiskered face. See that, Taliah-chan? Naruto asked his squirming girlfriend as he sent shivers up her spine by expelling small bursts of chakra from his arms, the equivalent of a tickle. He nodded to the 13-year-old and continued, even Piper thinks I'm irresistible. Hey, I never said that. Piper interjected with a small frown, I just said you were hot. Literally. The still smirking Naruto replied before leaving a peck on Taliah's cheek. The younger girl rolled her eyes while Taliah lightly elbowed her boyfriend with a faint blush over her own crossing her cheeks. The son of Apollo merely chuckled and released his girlfriend. That's enough goofing off, we've got maybe a 15-minute walk before we get to the tunnel, Naruto said to the two before he dramatically pointed away, Alon's why. The blonde demigod took off in a run, making Taliah shake her head at his antics. Piper just stared at his running form in disbelief, turning to Taliah and asking, is he always like that? Only after he forces his energy to speed up, Taliah explained with a smile as they followed the now hyperactive teen, he'll calm back down after a few minutes. He's nice, Piper said after a brief silence. Taliah glanced at her and the demigoddess continued, I mean, he's more, and you're, he's a goof and I'm kind of rough, right? Taliah asked, getting a meek nod from the younger girl. Taliah gave her a small smile and then looked back at her boyfriend that was now walking on his hands a few feet in front of them. The daughter of Zeus lightly giggled at his actions before she spoke again, that's just how we are. He's more touchy-feely than me. How did you two even meet? Piper asked, watching the blonde as he stopped walking on his hands and flipped forward to his feet. That's actually a pretty fun story, replied the daughter of Zeus. Talia's eyes glossed over and a more serene smile crossed her face as she thought back to when they met. Talia panted as she and Luke rounded another corner, their frantic running coming to a halt. They had just left the house of Halcyon Green, a house filled with monsters determined to kill them because of who their parents were, and all she got out of it was a bracelet that turned into a shield. A badass shield, mind you, but still, there could have been more than just a shield and monsters, like something that did more than scare them away for a bit. Looking around, she discovered they had entered an alley filled with scraps of iron, most likely from the nearby iron factory yard that they were separated from by a chain-link fence. We should rest here, Luke suggested, still regaining his breath. Talia nodded to the boy slightly older than herself before both plopped down with their backs to the building on their left. They could still hear faint roars and crashing from their pursuers, but at least they could rest for now. They got that rest for about 5 seconds before a rattling sound was heard. Luke and Talia both scrambled to their feet, readying their weapons and searching the alleyway. Luke noticed it first, pointing a few feet away at a shaking sheet of corrugated iron leaning against the building with his free hand. There. It can't be a monster, Talia whispered, could it? We have to be ready for anything, replied the elfish teen, cover me. Talia rolled her eyes but turned around nonetheless and watched the entrance to the alley. Luke carefully and quietly stepped towards it, his shaking hand reaching out to grasp the sheet of iron. He took a deep breath before grabbing the iron and pulling it back. Got you. Ah! Screamed a young girl that was hiding behind the iron. She was short, as were most children, and had blonde hair pulled into a ponytail. Before Luke could recover from his shock at finding a kid, the young blonde girl with eyes squeezed shut charged forward, brandishing a small black knife that she used to slash at him. Luke released a surprised cry of pain as it cut him across the front of his chest, thankfully not deep enough for anything serious, but surprised him enough to make him fall to his back. Talia turned around at the girl's scream, but didn't recover from her own surprise to stop the girl from cutting her friend. When the younger girl did climb on top of Luke and brought the knife above her head to stab him, the raven-haired girl acted, rushing forward and tackling the younger girl off of him. Wait a minute, she almost stabbed him. Piper exclaimed, cutting Talia off. The cry got their now calmed down quest leader's attention. Who almost stabbed who? Naruto asked curiously as they neared the Caldecott tunnel. Talia smiled and nudged her boyfriend with her arm. She asked how we met. Oh. Naruto said with an understanding nod before he grinned, Annie stabbing Luke. Yep, Talia said with a nod. Why would she stab at him? Piper asked curiously. Stab first, ask questions later, the couple answered in unison. Talia nudged the blonde's arm. This idiot can be so paranoid at times. I'd rather you be alive and guilty of murder than you dead, Naruto replied softly, making Talia smile at him. He cleared his throat and nudged her. Well, go on. I want to hear how awesome you thought I was. You wish, Talia retorted before she continued. Wrenching the blade from the girl's hand, Talia exclaimed, Relax. Relax. We aren't going to hurt you. What? The girl asked, opening her eyes and revealing 2 gray eyes to the older girl. She looked at Talia, then Luke, before scooting away and glaring at them. Who are you? Where's Naruto? Where is he? What did you do to him? Who are you talking about? Talia asked as she sat back on her knees and then looked down at the girl's knife in her hand. What kind of dagger is this? Who are you and where's Naruto? Demanded the young girl. Talia was looking at the knife and then looked back at the girl as she made the correct assumption that the girl before them was another demigod. Luke, who had gotten over his shock and had managed to confirm his cut wasn't too bad, walked over to Talia's side. Raising his hands, he said, Easy. I'm Luke, and this is Talia. We're demigods, too. The girl's eyes flickered between them distrustfully before she answered, Annabeth Chase. Where's Naruto? We don't know anyone named Naruto, Luke answered as Talia got to her feet. The 3 of them tensed when there was a rather loud boom. Annabeth looked to the building Talia and Luke had rested against in worry, making the 2 older demigods follow her gaze. Look, kid, we need to get moving, Talia said, taking a step towards the girl and offering her the strange weapon. Here's your dagger. It's called a kunai, Annabeth answered with a frown as she took the weapon. I'm not going anywhere without Naruto. We don't have a chance if we stay here, Luke whispered to Talia before looking at Annabeth. Listen, Annabeth, we can't wait here for Naruto. It's not safe. I'm not going. Annabeth cried back, lifting her kunai up defensively, not without Naruto. Ah, she really said that? Naruto asked with a smile, sweet little thing, Annie is. She makes me so proud to be her brother. Taliah groaned and opened her mouth to argue once more when there was a louder boom. The three demigods all turned to their left at the building, where Taliah and Luke had rested, as another loud bang came from within. They took a weary step back when dust shot out from the side in between the bricks. Annabeth shakily raised her kunai while Taliah and Luke prepared their own weapons. There was another shot of dust before Taliah was forced to raise her shield to protect herself from the debris as the wall exploded. Out skidded a giant metal bowl, gleaming bronze in the streetlight, breaking through the chain-link fence and slamming against a giant bin. From the still settling dust, walked out a panting teen. His blonde hair wild and untamed, he stood about as tall as Luke, but dressed in jeans with a strange black box strapped to his left leg and a white jacket with red flames that glistened unnaturally bright in the night. In his left hand was a golden bow that shone like the sun, and slung over his shoulders was a quiver. And he was handsome, right? Naruto cried while looking at his girlfriend. Taliah glanced at him for a good moment before smiling. Yes, I suppose he was handsome. Yes, Naruto said with a fist pump. He'd never gotten her to say it in public. Piper rolled her eyes while Taliah shook her head and continued. You are a pain in the ass to kill. The teen said with a cough before slinging the bow over his shoulder. Arrows don't do jack, your body is made of metal and it takes a friggin' Udama Rasengan, great ball spiraling sphere, to send you packing. Naruto! Annabeth cried out in joy and relief. She made to run to him when a raised hand kept her in place. Stay back, Annie! The teen, Naruto, ordered as he looked towards them. Hardly giving them the time, the teen looked back at the bull and frowned. Culcus bull. You just had to be a Culcus bull. The Culcus bull snorted and let out a fiery snort before a mechanical roar escaped its mouth. Naruto grinned and cracked his knuckles. Alright, let's do this. He held his hands up in a strange form. Hand seal. Naruto interjected with a frown. Whatever, the daughter of Zeus replied as her eyes rolled. He held his hands up in a hand seal that looked like he was crossing his index and middle fingers. Suddenly there was an exact replica of the teen, making Taliah and Luke's jaws drop. Hold on, replica. You can clone yourself? Piper asked. I thought Apollo was the god of the sun and prophecies. Gift from my mom, Naruto answered as he snapped his fingers and a duplicate appeared. He punched it and it disappeared just as quickly. Give me an open field and I could make an army. Only downside is, that army could be eradicated in one strike. It gets weirder than that, trust me, Taliah comforted the disbelieving demigoddess before continuing with her story. The original's hand extended and the clone cupped his hands over it. The one with his hand extended continued to speak. Maybe a few more Rasengans will bust you a dash. The Culcus bull reared its head back and then flicked it forward, a saw blade flying from a slot in the center of its head. Annabeth cried out the teen's name as the blade sliced through the new duplicate. Rather than fall to the ground, the body exploded into smoke, making Naruto look over at it. Naruto dryly finished. His hand fell to his side and he laughed nervously. Well, look at that. You shoot discs. The Culcus bull released a mechanical bellow and charged at Naruto. The blonde yelped and dove into a roll towards the three demigods, avoiding the charge. Coming out of his roll into a crouch, pulling a knife from the container on his leg and tossing it as the bull stumbled over itself in an effort to turn. The beast was struck in the eye, making it veer into the wall of the building, slowing it down and making it stop. If she had to be honest with herself, it was very impressive. Naruto rose up and turned around, running towards them. Taliah could see his shirt, or rather, what remained of it. Scorch marks covered an ironically burnt orange t-shirt, revealing hints of a toned torso underneath. And you liked what you saw? Ow! Naruto exclaimed when Taliah shoved him into the wall of the hidden shaft within the caldecott. Rubbing his shoulder he asked, why are you so mean to me? Call it tough love, Taliah replied with a smirk before she resumed telling the snickering Piper the story of their first meeting. Naruto ran past Taliah, turning to the side and grabbing Annabeth under her shoulders, picking her up and running. Over his shoulder the blonde cried out, are you UN? Taliah and Luke exchanged a glance before following after him. And we ran, and ran, and ran. Naruto cut in with a smile on his face before he laughed, almost lost it at an intersection, though. Remember that? How could I forget? The look on that guy's face when his new stand was destroyed out of nothing. Talia laughed along with her boyfriend. The two smiled in remembrance as they walked, before Naruto's eyes widened and he walked ahead of the two girls, turning around and walking backwards. "Ooh, can I tell the next part?" Naruto asked, looking at the raven-haired girl with a pleading pout. "Please?" "No. I'm telling the story," Talia said with a smirk. "I'll make that face," threatened the son of Apollo. Talia stopped walking, making the other two copy her. Piper's brows furrowed as she looked between the two, wondering what that face was. "You wouldn't dare," Talia said as her face fell into a look of slight fear. "Oh, just try me," Naruto said, his whiskered cheeks widening in a smile that made the daughter of Zeus' spine freeze. "I swear to the gods if you do what I think you're going to do I'll. Talia tried to counter, only succeeding in making Naruto grin. A warm blush started to spread across her cheeks as she recalled the last time Naruto used that face, on the quest for Artemis. The image she saw shortly afterwards, the child with hair as dark as her own yet with eyes as blue as his, the face that laughed at her in her dreams, dreams of hope that is. "You know how easy it is for me," Naruto teased, raising his left hand's index and middle fingers, just one flare of chakra. "You infuriate me sometimes, Naruto Uzumaki," Talia growled. Naruto grinned, moving in a flash of light and reappearing with his arms wrapped around her. He brought his forehead down against hers, a smile on his face. "Glad that there's one way I can keep you in line," he joked before kissing her deeply. After a moment of their originally chaste lip lock, Piper flushed bright red as Talia relaxed into the kiss, wrapping her arms around his neck and turning it very intimate. The young demigoddess wanted to say something, interrupt maybe, but there was a part of her that didn't want to. Some part of her wanted what the two in front of her had. She may be a tomboy, but that didn't mean she wasn't a girl, scratch that, human. All humans crave companionship, from the simplest of friends to the deep significant others. Maybe someday. For now, Piper gathered enough nerve to clear her throat, causing the two to break from their minor makeout session. Talia blushed while Naruto grinned. Moving to keep his right arm over the raven-haired daughter of Zeus' shoulders to keep her from hiding away, the blonde guardian looked at the bright red-faced and glaring daughter of Tristan McLean. "Where were we?" Naruto asked before nodding. "Right. Killing the Calcus bull. Well, after we got through Richmond, we made it to a nice little park. I handed Annabeth to a clone and led the bull away. Split up." Naruto instructed the group as he handed Annabeth to his clone. Talia broke off after him, Luke after the clone carrying the concerned Annabeth. The Calcus bull chased after the original blonde, bleeding out fire as it did so. "Any more bright ideas?" Talia asked as she followed the older teen. Naruto looked over his shoulder at the running bull and then looked ahead of him. There was a bench that would maybe give them a millisecond of extra time if they ran around it, and beyond that was a pond. "I've got it!" exclaimed the blonde with a grin. Pointing at the bench, he continued, "Run past the bench. Get to the pond." "Then what?" the raven-haired demigoddess asked. "We go fishing. Just trust me," Naruto said as they approached the bench. As Talia ran around it, Naruto jumped over the bench with ease, while their pursuer smashed through it like it was nothing. Naruto looked behind him at the bull before tossing another kunai at the mechanical monster. Piercing another eye, the bull roared in fury as it started to trip. Naruto dove at Talia, tackling her to the ground and out of the way of the tripping Calcus bull. The bull went head under hooves into the pond, entering the small pool of water with a large splash. Naruto grunted when he got drenched, rolling to his back next to the younger demigoddess. They waited for a moment before Naruto stood, looking down into the pond. "Stupid machine," said the teen as a grin started to come over his face. Cupping his hands around his mouth, Naruto called out, "Regroup." He turned and offered Talia his hand. "That was fun, right?" "Fun? You call almost dying fun?" Talia questioned in disbelief. Naruto shrugged. "Yeah, well, you only live once, right?" he said as she took his hand. Pulling her up, Naruto smiled down at the shorter girl, making her blush under his fox-like grin. "I didn't blush," Talia interjected with a frown. "Oh, yes you did," Naruto said with rolled eyes, "besides you even told me you like my smile. I think that was last week, even." Piper bit on her lip to keep from laughing when Talia blushed and stormed ahead. These two were better than television sometimes. Naruto chuckled before looking back at the 13-year-old, "She'll get over it." He looked at the raven-haired girl with spiky hair that went down to her shoulders. She had a face that would narrow out from cute into beautiful, two electric blue eyes that looked back up at him in curiosity. A large leather jacket with a few scratches here and there, but otherwise looked good on her. In her right hand was a spear and around her left arm was a shield with the face of Medusa plastered on it. The shield made him pause, taking it into his hand. "Aegis?" he asked, blinking in shock when the shield shrunk down into a bracelet. "That was cool. How did you know to do that?" Talia asked, before blushing once more as she realized he was still holding onto her. "Let go of my arm." "Sorry," apologized the blonde. He reached up and scratched at the back of his head. "I do a lot of reading and watch out." Naruto shoved the girl away from him, making her stumble back as the Calchas bull suddenly barreled into his side, sending him rolling into the park. He heard his name called out by a familiar voice, eyes widening when he realized who that voice belonged to: Annabeth. Pushing himself to a seated position, Naruto groaned and looked through a squinted eye at the mechanically bronze monster that snorted fire standing a good 40 feet from him. The slit in its head opened and a saw blade made of bronze was revealed, spinning rapidly as its head reared back. Naruto faltered for words, thinking of how he was going to get out of this. Grabbing his bow and an arrow, Naruto knocked the small bronze arrow in place, swallowing as he took aim. The world around him slowed down as he focused on the launched projectile. He released his arrow, sending it flying and knocking the approaching death weapon off course. The saw flipped in the air before landing harmlessly to the side. Naruto and the Calchas bull stared at one another before the bull bellowed out a roar, fire leaving its mouth as it did so. It charged forward and Naruto prepared himself to jump when there was a boom of thunder. The bull paid no mind to this and continued to charge, until a bolt of lightning struck it. Naruto had to shield his eyes with his arm, carefully watching as the beast was electrocuted into death. Gold dust spilled from the monster as it fell, allowing him to see the raven-haired, spear-wielding demigoddess standing behind where the Calchas bull once stood. Her left hand was extended and her breathing was heavy. "You can use lightning?" he asked as Annabeth, the clone, and Luke rejoined them. The girl took in another breath before she nodded, making Naruto's brow furrow. "But that would mean..." "Talia Grace," Talia said, introducing herself as she rested on her spear, "daughter of Zeus." "The super pervert is your dad?" Talia gaped at him while the sky boomed in anger. Luke likewise had a look of shock on his face. Their surprise was broken when the blonde's clone exploded after Annabeth had escaped its clutches. She ran forward and wrapped her arms around Naruto's leg, making the taller blonde look down at her in surprise and then with a smile. A hand on the young demigoddess' head, he looked back up at the other demigods with a grin. "That's cool. At least you know who your parent is," he said. "Name's Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." "Nice to meet you, Talia-chan." And the name stuck ever since, Talia groaned jokingly, making Naruto grin at her. She had gotten over her little temper tantrum and fell back in line with them, where Naruto promptly threw his arm around her shoulders once again. It wasn't like she minded. The sun-eyed blonde poked his girlfriend's side with his free hand. "Oh, you know you love it." "Maybe now I do, Whiskers," Talia retorted, "but back then it was annoying as hell." "Hold on, there's something I don't get," Piper said as they came closer to the exit door. Naruto and Talia looked at the younger girl, making her continue with her question. "Talia, you said Naruto's eyes were blue. But now they have this sun in them. Did he have it then, too?" "Nope," Talia said, looking at her boyfriend's eyes with a small smile. "He just showed up with them last year." "Has to do with my title, Helios Heir," Naruto explained with a shrug. "Hopefully I'll have to demonstrate and not show you in battle." "If you say so," Piper mumbled as her eyes went to the door. "So that's it then?" "Sort of. We still have a long walk ahead of us," Naruto explained as he reached out and pressed his hand against the door, "but I guess this reveal will have to do." Pushing the door open, Naruto revealed a bright sunlit area, a grassy plain and in the distance, a walled city. As the three exited the Caldecott Tunnel's hidden entrance, Talia and Piper stared at the walled city. Naruto extended his arms and took a few steps forward. "Ladies, welcome to the home of the Romans. Welcome to Camp Jupiter." As the three walked forward, their mysterious pursuer silently slipped out of the tunnel. The two dark eyes narrowed once more and he dug into his pocket, pulling out a kunai not unlike the ones Naruto carried, with a tag already wrapped around it. His headband, strapped to his arm, had the kanji for shinobi engraved in it. Spinning the kunai in his finger by the small hole at the end, the shinobi threw the blade down a few feet in front of him, where it dug into the ground. There was a large cloud of smoke and 3 figures joined the first. One stepped forward, calm and collected. "Is he here?" "Just a few paces ahead," replied the one who had summoned them. "We'll take him before he can alert this camp of our presence." "He's not going to go quietly," one growled at the summoner, who glared back at him. "Well, tough. He had his chance to come in peacefully," the summoner shot back. The 4 turned their gazes to the back of the laughing blonde that had thrown his arm around that of the raven-haired girl. "Just don't attack the girls. They're his precious people." "Fine," spat the growling figure before throwing a finger in the summoner's face. "I want it on the record that I don't like this." "Orders are orders," the summoner replied solemnly. His gaze went to the back of the blonde's head. Chapter 8. As the 3 approached a bridge that would take them across the river to Camp Jupiter, Piper noticed a statue of a man with no arms. A giant cinder block seemed to make up his lower half and was marked with the letters Termi NVS carved into it. Both she and Talia looked at it oddly, wondering the significance of it, while Naruto redirected himself to approach the statue. "You are not welcome here, Greeks," the statue said, springing to life with a baritone male voice. Its eyes focused on the blonde and in a word filled with anger, it exclaimed, "You." "Yo!" The blonde greeted cheerily. "Did you miss me, Terminus?" "Miss you?" The statue, Terminus, scoffed. "You and your insanity. Your speech nearly split this camp in 2. "Speech?" Talia asked her boyfriend curiously. Naruto shrugged. "Something I said like 5 years back," the blonde said before turning his attention back to the armless statue. "You're not still mad, are you?" "Not still mad? How could I be mad? You only nearly started a riot." Terminus snarled, making both of the demigoddesses look at the blonde in confusion. Naruto merely shrugged again. "I just thought it was weird is all," the blonde said, all that misplaced anger. "Why should they have to keep the rage going? It is strength that drives them, not anger." Terminus snapped. "The Romans are stronger. We are better." "Maybe, maybe not," Naruto debated, "but let me ask you this, god of boundaries, if you were better than the Greeks, you would have noticed my tail before me, wouldn't you?" "What?" Talia asked, turning around and looking for any sort of person. "How long have you known?" "Since we left the tunnel," Naruto said as he looked intently at Terminus. "I was hoping you'd stop them, but you never even noticed, did you?" "Noticed what?" Terminus demanded. Naruto leaned into the statue's face, a frown crossing his own. Raising his right hand, Naruto built chakra into his hand and snapped his fingers next to the statue's head. Terminus' eyes widened and he sputtered before exclaiming, "Boo, but that's impossible. It's inconceivable." "It's shinobi," retorted the blonde before turning around and stepping in front of Talia, first sneaking up on the goddess of the hunt, now breaking through boundaries. "What's next? Challenging the king for his throne?" His words were meant with silence, his brows furrowing. "Thought that would bring you out. Unless, no. No, you're not really waiting for me to be alone, are you?" There was not another answer and Naruto allowed a smirk to cross his face. "Alright, that's clever. I'll give you that. So who's out there this time?" Once more he was met with silence. Reaching into his pocket, Naruto pulled out the pendant his father had given him. He turned around and put the pendant in Talia's hand. "Take this and get into the city. Find the praetors. Tell them that camp is under attack. You've led enemies to the camp." Terminus shouted in rage. "Not intentionally," Naruto retorted before turning his attention back to Talia. "Take Piper and go. Get the legion ready." "I told you that I'm not leaving you behind," Talia growled. Naruto grinned and cupped her left cheek in his hand. "You're not leaving me behind," he said, "you're getting back up." Talia looked into his eyes before frowning. "You infuriate me sometimes, Naruto Uzumaki." "Yeah, but you love it," replied the blonde with a wink. Patting her cheek he turned back to face the way they had came, cracking his neck and saying, "Terminus, I'd sound the alarm if I were you. An exile defending the camp. Preposterous. Outrageous." The statue raged before his mouth turned upward in a smirk, "And yet, just crazy enough to work. If there's one thing I despise more than rulebreakers, it's losing this camp to invaders. Ad arma, hostibus in porta. At arms. Enemy at the gate." A siren broke out through the camp beyond the wall, making Naruto grin. "You actually had an alarm installed?" "It seemed like a good idea at the time," Terminus explained before looking at the girls. "You too? Greeks. You have the blessing of Apollo, get beyond the wall. Go! Naruto said when Taliah and Piper turned to him. He rolled his shoulders and let a smile cross his face. I've got to greet the people at the door. Taliah and Piper stared at the team before turning towards the walled camp. The younger demigoddess' hand was taken by the older ones, pulling her along as they crossed the bridge. The gates opened as they approached. Taliah lifted the pendant given to her as a girl around Piper's age stepped out with a golden spear in her hand. Golden armor covered her torso, arms and legs, a small purple cape sticking out between her shoulder and her neck. We're here because dash. Taliah began only for the girl to point her spear at her. Terminus has explained the situation to us. My fellow Praetor is preparing his cohort for battle as we speak. We just await Terminus' final word on the intruders now, the girl said before looking around expectantly. So, where is he? Where is who? Piper asked in confusion, and what's with the siren? The camp is preparing for battle, the girl replied with a frown. Who are you, Greek? Piper McLean, Piper replied, her brows furrowing as something inside her told her to be wary of this girl. And do I look Greek to you? You reek of it, the armored girl replied, lowering her spear slightly, and looked the demigoddesses up and down, and your posture all but screams undisciplined. Yeah, this is nice and all, but would you let her in already so I can go stop my boyfriend from getting himself killed? Taliah asked impatiently. The Roman girl looked at her with a scrutinizing gaze. Yes, I suppose you're right, she said after a moment. I am Reyna, Praetor of the 12th Legion. Taliah, the daughter of Zeus, replied shortly. Now that the introductions are out of the way, can we get a move on? Their conversation was interrupted as the ground shook. A statue next to them came to life, eyes narrowed in fury and his mouth set in a deep infuriated scowl, before Terminus' voice echoed around the camp. Traitor! Legacy of Bacchus, descendant of the giants, Choji Akamichi, you are hereby deemed traitor and enemy of Camp Jupiter. The three girls turned their attention towards the entry, looking up and up and up until they laid their eyes on a portly man standing almost 100 feet tall, wearing red clothes and plated armor on his arms, chest and thighs. He had long spiky brown hair and what looked like red swirls tattooed on his cheeks. A red headband with a metal plate, much like the one on Naruto's belt, was wrapped around his head, a strange marking engraved on it. He opened his mouth and said something in his deep voice that made Taliah's eyes widen. You've been gone long enough, Naruto. It's time to come home. The second Taliah and Piper had fled over the bridge, the shinobi had emerged from their hiding place. He faced against them and arched a brow. This seems like a strange combination. Never thought I'd see you three again. Maybe Kakashi and Yamato, but not you guys. It was a bit of a pain, tracking you down. The blonde demigod's gaze landed on the man with a tired look on his face, black hair pulled up into a ponytail that made his head look like a pineapple. He was dressed in the traditional attire for the Konohan Jonin, save for the sash around his waist. Naruto nodded at it. You became one of the 12 guardians. You really are following in his footsteps, aren't you, Shikamaru? TCH, only because my mother wouldn't stop nagging and saying how much of an honor it is to be asked, Shikamaru replied, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a cigarette. As he searched for a match, Naruto made a ram seal before he spoke. Hai no Nagar no Jutsu, fiery stream technique, he said as he inhaled slightly. Presenting his lips like he was going to whistle, a long stream of fire shot from his mouth, dissipating after it lit the edge of Shikamaru's cigarette. The two other shinobi remained tense while the large white dog growled in warning. Naruto rubbed at his throat as he cleared it. Ugh, always tastes so nasty coming up. So you can use fire techniques, Shikamaru mumbled, reaching up and removing his cigarette from his mouth. Not really a secret for a native of fire country, Naruto replied, his eyes narrowing. You speak English rather well. How long have you been studying it? Shikamaru nonchalantly took another drag before he answered, ever since Team Kakashi came back, without you. Sucks when you suck, doesn't it? Enough of this bullshit! Exclaimed the wild-looking man wearing a fur-lined leather jacket. A headband with the insignia that adorned Shikamaru's held his own wild brown hair back, and his bright red fawn-like markings seemed faded slightly. Next to him was a large white dog, nearing the size of a horse. The man snarled and clenched his hands. We outnumber you 4-1, dumbass. Just give it up already. Canines were bared by the man's large dog before it spoke. Come with us, or we will make you, Namikaze. That's new, Naruto muttered with a frown before he leaned towards Akamaru and asked, since when can you speak? I've always been able to talk, Namikaze, you've just never heard me until now. barked the giant white dog. "Hm, guess you weren't trying hard enough," the blonde mused. He turned his gaze to the feral man and smirked, itching for a rematch. "Kibble breath? I'll pound you so hard into the dirt your ancestors will feel it, Naruto." The man snarled, before pointing at the blonde, "If you don't come with us peacefully, we've been ordered to bring you in by force." "Wow, that's never been said to me before, Kiba," Naruto sarcastically replied. "I mean, if Kakashi no Sharingan couldn't take me in, what makes you think you can?" Kakashi wasn't going all out. Kiba snapped back, flexing his clawed hands and growling, "I don't have that handicap." "A rabid dog on a leash," Naruto muttered with narrowed eyes before he turned his gaze to the quiet one, "Et2, Choji?" "Orders are orders, Naruto," shrugged the large man. As soon as he spoke, Terminus shifted his gaze to him, making the three shinobi and dog blink in surprise. "2. You've a Purim. 'Cause enemy S2? You. Great boy. Who are you?" asked the head as he stared intently at the man. Choji faltered in his words before he replied to the statue, "Akamichi Choji, Jonin of Konohagakure no Sato." How did you do that, Naruto?" "What did it just say?" Kiba asked while Akamaru whimpered as an instinctual fight or flight instinct was activated. "I think it was another language," Shikamaru mumbled as his eyes narrowed in thought. His gaze went to the surprised look on his one-time friend's face. Naruto stared at Choji before he broke into a fox-like grin. "Wow, so there are more. How did you do that, Naruto?" Choji demanded. "How did you make it talk?" "Oh, I didn't do anything," the blonde replied as he grinned. "Didn't your mother call you a grape when you were a kid?" "How do you know that?" "You were young and angry, you didn't always seem red, no. You seemed a deeper shade sometimes," mused the blonde with a grin on his face as his hand cupped his chin, purple almost. "Yeah, so? It's a condition that comes from my father's line," Choji said with a frown. "So what?" "Oh, they never knew," Naruto said with his eyes widening, "all this time and he's never even thought about it. He's got us in genjutsu." Shikamaru interjected, breaking Naruto's train of thought. The three shinobi put their hands in the ram's seal and exclaimed at the same time, "Kai, release." There was an audible static in noise before the alarm became noticeable, Kiba and Akamaru covering their ears crying out in pain as the sudden noise overwhelmed their senses. Choji and Shikamaru scowled, the thinner man's hands forming the rat seal. His shadow extended before stopping halfway, Naruto's eyebrows rising in surprise. "Ooh, shouldn't have done that," Naruto said as he crossed his arms. Looking down at the ground, Naruto sucked in air between his teeth. "Oh, yeah, the Nara clan is officially on his shit list, and so am I probably should have told him about you." "What did you do?" Shikamaru asked, forming the ram seal and trying again only for the same result to occur. This time, however, the shadow was shorter in length. "I'd stop if I were you," Naruto warned. "He's not big on sharing his domain, it's big enough as it is." Shikamaru lowered his hands and took another drag on his cigarette in thought. Someone else is controlling the shadows here, right?" Naruto smiled secretively. "Oh yeah. So you've successfully taken me and Kiba out of the situation until I think of something and he adjusts to the sound," replied the Jonin with a frown. He turned to his friend and said, "Choji. Do it. You have one last chance, Naruto. Come with us willingly," Choji said with frown. Naruto scoffed and subtly reached behind him into his pocket, pulling out his book of seals, while he replied, "You'll have to force me." "Fine." The large man snapped before his hands blurred through seals, Chobaika no Jutsu, super multi-size technique. Shikamaru, Kiba and Akamaru all leapt away and out of sight as Choji started to grow. First by a foot, then 2 and then jumping up to 20 feet high. Yet, he still continued to grow. Finally, Naruto stumbled backwards as the supersized 100-foot-tall Choji took a step forward, his book of seals flying out of his hand and landing near Terminus. The blonde fell to his back with a grunt, glaring at the sky as he thought, "Someone is out to get me, and I have a good idea who she is." "Giant!" Terminus exclaimed in surprise. "Yeah, he is," Naruto said, as he got up. "Fantastic, he's managed to master his clan's signature technique. And on top of that he's a legacy of Bacchus." "How do you know?" Terminus demanded. "I'm very good at what I do." Naruto snapped before looking back up at Choji and mumbling, "I'm gonna need help, Helios, Helios." While Naruto tried to contact his past life, Terminus scowled as he glared up at Choji before he linked up with the rest of his statues scattered throughout the camp and exclaimed furiously. Traitor! Legacy of Bacchus, descendant of the giants, Choji Akamichi, you are hereby deemed traitor and enemy of Camp Jupiter. Ignoring the statue, Choji frowned, you've been gone long enough, Naruto. It's time to come home. Naruto grinned widely at that proclamation and looked at the giant shinobi. Hey, guess what, Choji? You are officially the fattest thing on the planet. What did you just say to me? The giant bellowed, his face scrunching up in anger and turning a dark shade of red. You are fat, Naruto shouted. Choji's eyes turned red and his hand lifted up. I'm going to enjoy this, Naruto. The giant exclaimed with a purpling face. Good. Get angry and fight me like the fat, stupid idiot you are. Naruto exclaimed as he burst into golden flames. Now, let's light it up. Choji's foot lifted up and Naruto braced himself. As the giant foot came down, the golden demigod's hands went up. Terminus' eyes widened and he faltered before murmuring out, that's impossible. The descending sandaled foot of the giant shinobi rushed downwards, encasing Naruto and the statue of Terminus in shadow. The glowing teen's hands pressed against the sole of the giant's foot, creating a shockwave that caused nearby trees to fall. Naruto grunted as he was slowly brought to his knees. Fighting a titan was one thing, holding the weight of a giant was a whole different ballgame. Clenching his jaw, the heir of Helios fell to one knee, fighting against the weight of his one-time friend. He closed his eyes as he held up the foot. Did I miss something? A grin crossed the face of the reincarnated god when Helios' voice popped up, just took a brief nap. Zeus girl does a fantastic job of telling stories, you know. Where's that spirit animal of yours? He's got another job at the moment. Man, it's great to hear your voice, Naruto said in exertion as he dropped to a crouch, ready to go all out. Do you love ramen? Let's kick some giant ass. The former god of the sun said in excitement. Naruto's golden eyes narrowed, the blue sun-like pupils shining radiantly along with the markings across his body as he released a roar and pushed up. Choji grunted and wobbled on his feet as Naruto slowly stood. From where they were hiding, Shikamaru and Kiba were in awe while Akamaru had covered his head and began whimpering. That shouldn't be happening, Kiba whispered in worry, that's impossible. Not even Tsunade-sama can hold off Akamichi at full height. Kakashi's reports weren't wrong, Shikamaru murmured, I think, we might have bitten off more than we can chew. You think? Kiba hissed before looking back at the golden figure that was toppling the giant. Fifth cohort. Terminus bust within the barracks of the fifth cohort, a good number of soldiers of all shapes and sizes stood at attention before a young man wearing the same armor as Reina stepped forward. The exiled one has returned, and he is using the power of the gods. He faces a giant. Wait. It's toppled. He's tossed the giant with his bare hands. The ground shook and the cohort started to murmur before the golden-armored Roman spoke. Who is he? This exiled one, give us his name. You of all know him best, Praetor, the Roman god said to the teen, you tried to defend him from your father's wrath. The Praetor's eyes widened and he abruptly turned before ordering, clear the way. The cohort made a wide path, allowing the Praetor to clench his fists at his side. Wind built up in the Barak before the Praetor shot out at the speed of a bullet. His helmet was left behind, allowing the handsome face of a young man to be seen by the world had it been watching. Talia, Piper and Reina were running back towards the battlefield when something shot by them. Reina furrowed her brow, murmuring to herself in confusion, what's gotten you all worked up, Jason? What did you just say? Talia asked, looking at the dark-haired girl. My fellow Praetor, Jason Grace, Reina said, making Talia's eyes widen as she stared at the girl, son of Jupiter. Choji reared his hand back and brought it down, only for Naruto to catch it with ease. The golden boy adjusted his grip on the giant's pinky and pushed the hand down into the ground. Jumping up onto the hand, Naruto ran forward, jumping once again as the other hand tried to clap down on him. He climbed up the arm and onto the giant's shoulder, pulling his left fist back and driving it into the right cheek of his old childhood friend. Choji's head snapped to the side with a thunderous boom and his body followed. Naruto landed on the ground next to his old friend's body, looking at Choji's dazed face almost apologetically. Of all the people who he didn't want to fight, Choji was among the top of the list. Innocent, sweet, powerful Choji with only one weakness that he exploited, his anger. Choji's rage was legendary. Hell, the man's family's rage was almost as legendary as his grandfather's. His thoughts were broken by a whistling sound. Turning to face the new arrival, Naruto raised a hand to shield his face from the debris that shot up when a person landed in an earth-splitting skid. Lowering his hand, Naruto narrowed his eyes at the dust before he grinned widely when he could see through it. "Well, look who's decided to grace me with his presence," joked the golden teen. Stepping out of the dust stood a teen just a few inches shy of his height, broad-shouldered and dressed in golden armor with a purple cape falling from his shoulders. His face was handsome and his features very similar to Naruto's own. Golden blonde hair covered his head and electric blue eyes twinkled slightly in the light. It was a face that Naruto could never forget, not even if he tried. It was the face of his girlfriend's deceased little brother, Jason Grace. "I've never heard that one before," Jason said before smiling widely. "You've certainly gotten shinier since we last met." "Do you like it?" inquired the teen as he struck a pose. "I've been thinking of getting a dimmer installed. You know, for those days when it's not too dark." "It suits you," Jason replied with a smirk, getting a fox-like grin from the older teen as he relaxed. He then looked at the large form groaning behind the glowing teen. "So, tossing giants becoming a regular thing for you?" "Well, not all the time," Naruto said, leaning back against the giant stomach of his old friend, "just today." Jason hummed at his words, still looking at the giant before he looked at the glowing teen. The power he radiated, it had his senses screaming at him to avoid conflict with the man before him. It was like facing a god, suicide unless you were immortal, but even then, there was no guarantee you'd survive. "Move!" cried the glowing teen as he shoved the younger blonde out of the way from a descending hand. Choji grunted as he missed his opportunity at squishing the smaller warriors, rolling to his other side and getting back to his feet. Naruto and Jason rolled out of their evasive maneuver, Jason's face becoming stern and serious while Naruto whistled as he stood. "Wow. That's impressive. Even Atlas needed a millisecond to recover from my left hook." "You fought Atlas?" Jason asked as he pulled out a gold coin and flipped it into the air, catching it as it descended. A golden spear appeared in his hand and Jason narrowed his eyes at the giant that was trying to relocate them. "Diana was in trouble. I was on a quest. I'll tell you about it later," he replied. "Listen, this guy isn't the same as normal giants. I need your help on this, because we're not trying to kill him." "Not kill him? He's a friggin' giant," Jason hissed. Naruto's gaze snapped to him and Jason reluctantly cowed. "Yes. Not kill him. He's going to be a message." "Message to who?" asked the son of Jupiter. Naruto didn't reply, prompting Jason to take a deep breath before looking at the giant. The younger blonde looked to the golden teen. "What do we do if we're not going to kill it?" "It's been a while since we fought together, Jay," Naruto said as he turned to the younger demigod. "Remember our wombo combo?" "How do you forget something that's stupidly named?" Jason asked his fellow blonde. Naruto whacked his two fingers against the teen's head. "Blasphemy. It was genius then and genius now," Naruto admonished, looking at the standing giant shinobi. "On my mark." "How is this not going to kill him?" Jason asked. "It won't, so just shut up and wait for my signal," Naruto said before vanishing in a flash of light. He reappeared on Choji's shoulder, whistling sharply to get the massive shinobi's attention. "Found you," Choji said as he started to reach for the blonde. Ah. "Can't touch me," Naruto said, raising his left hand. "Solar flare." Choji cried out in pain as Naruto's hand brightened to a blinding light, his eyes getting the full brunt of it. As Choji flailed around in blindness, Naruto vanished once more, teleporting to Jason's side. "Give me some wind, Thunder Boy," Naruto ordered as he raised his hands in front of him and started to whip his hands through several hand seals. Jason pointed his spear up, gathering dark clouds overhead. The wind gathered around his spear until it looked like a small tornado. "Naruto!" Choji roared, rubbing at his eyes. "You have to come home, Naruto." "Not today," Naruto replied as he built chakra in his lungs and converted it with his natural affinity. Rearing his head back as he inhaled, Naruto cried out, "Now Jason! Katon, Genkyu, fire release, great blaze ball." Jason swung his spear just as Naruto's head flew forward, firing a giant ball of fire. The wind added speed and size to the attack until it was about 10 feet in diameter. The technique hit the giant shinobi, sending him flying over the city like Camp Jupiter. Choji screamed as he flew, his armor burning away in his body slowly but forcibly shrinking as his chakra tried to defend the host. The impact, almost a mile away near the fields of Mars, made a large dome of fire. Naruto waited until the dome faded, and then he turned around, narrowing his eyes at the shadow user that was glaring at him. Jason spun around and brandished his spear, getting ready to attack but was stayed by Naruto's extended hand. The golden teen crossed his arms over his chest before he spoke, "Now what? I've just roasted your best friend, you can't access your clan's techniques, and right now both Akamaru and Kiba are shaking in fear as their instincts tell them to run. You want to know why?" The son of Konoha's Jonin commander's cheek twitched, but he remained silent. Naruto grinned as he answered, "I'm just that awesome. Why won't you come home?" Shikamaru gritted out, "First Sasuke, now you." "Why? Why?" Naruto said nothing, merely powering down before stepping forward, his eyes narrowed. His hands gripped Shikamaru's Jonin flak jacket and lifted the man up. Blue orbs with small suns looked into two coal-colored eyes before Naruto bared his clenched teeth and said, "I am nothing. Like Sasuke. Then come home." Shikamaru grunted back. The blonde continued to glare at him, before pulling him down and whispering in his ear. Naruto whispered something to him that made Shikamaru's eyes widen before lifting him back up. Naruto then said, "Now tell me what you really want to know." The strategist and team leader swallowed before asking what was on his mind. "Why can't I outsmart you?" "You can," Naruto replied with a smirk before nodding behind him, "you just can't outmaneuver them." Shikamaru looked over his oddly younger friend's head to see a bunch of teens of all ages standing behind the blonde wearing golden armor, each of them pointing various sharp weapons in their direction. Naruto spoke again, earning Shikamaru's attention. "You see, for all your brains, for all your foresight, you just can't outsmart a battalion of Romans. Wanna know why?" Not giving the teen a chance to answer, Naruto continued, "They've got the best damn army on the planet." Chapter 9. Will Solace was worried. He had one job and he'd screwed it up. Not only was it a job, but one of the big three, the scariest one in his opinion, had given him a show of faith, a blessing to enter and leave the 13th cabin at his leisure. Though with how odd Bianca's illness became, he hardly had the time to keep an eye on Nico. "You're sure you haven't seen him, Chiron?" Will asked, almost pleadingly, as he nervously stood at the entrance of Hades' cabin. The centaur sighed and ran a hand down his face. "Will, relax. Whatever has happened to Nico is out of your control, and Lord Hades can't harm you while Bianca's still in need of a caretaker," Chiron said to the teenager. "Go do what you've been assigned. I will focus on this matter and search for young Nico if it puts you at ease." Will sighed and nodded, turning away and slowly closing the cabin door. "Thanks, Chiron." The blonde teen groaned and put a hand over his face, sighing heavily before he went back to Bianca's room. Ranger's head lifted as he pushed the door open and went to his designated pale patient, lifting her arm and checking her for a faint pulse. Will shook his head and murmured, "Figures." While he tried to get more fluids in Bianca's veins, Will worried what his eldest brother would do to him when he found out that he had lost the younger charge. While Will Solace was worrying about both Bianca's strange illness and Nico's absence and Naruto Uzumaki was fighting a giant, Annabeth Chase was leading her quest once again through the labyrinth. They had just left Alcatraz, failing to convince a hundred-handed one to accompany them after slaying his torturer, the horrifying camp, and prompting Annabeth to think about their conversation with Hera. "So why are you here again?" Percy asked as he, Annabeth, Grover and Tyson sat with the Queen of Olympus passing out a lunch at the table once covered with dust after the teen's stomach rumbled. "Percy, Percy, Percy," Hera tisked as she gave Grover a bowl of salad, "I'm here to help you." "But how?" Annabeth cried, "How can you be here? I thought the gods couldn't interfere on a quest." "Oh? What do you call what Apollo did over the winter?" The Queen of Olympus scoffed, "If you must know, every century for one quest I care deeply about, my husband will let me grant one wish." "But why help us?" Continued the daughter of Athena, "I thought you hated heroes. You have one spat with one demigod and it follows you forever, I swear." Hera sighed before looking at Grover. "Stop chewing on that napkin, dear. It's not good for you." "Yes ma'am," the satyr said, spitting the bits in his mouth out. "But didn't you try to kill him?" Annabeth asked, "Like, a lot of times?" "Water under the bridge," Hera dismissed, "and besides, I happen to be fond of many heroes, Jason for instance." "The Argonaut, right?" Percy asked. The Queen gave him a small smile. Yes, Hera confirmed before passing him another sandwich. There's another who's earned my attention though. Your friend, Naruto. At their stunned stares, save for Tyson who was enjoying the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the goddess continued, you all seem so surprised by that. He's the son of a god, yes, but a child of matrimony. A sire of a proper relationship between god and mortal. Wait a second, Annabeth interjected, Naruto's dad, Apollo, he married someone. Apollo? I was in just as much disbelief as you were when I heard that, Hera said, 8 years ago, Apollo waking up from a prophetic trance with a loud exuberant cry. I had thought he found a new challenge. Imagine my surprise when he returned that evening with a tale of his new son, 15 years old, saving a city from a delusional gravity manipulating mortal. He did what? Percy asked. Grover snorted and stuck a piece of lettuce in his mouth, figures. Leaving the best part out of a story, that screams Naruto. Yes, and his name was so strange, Hera commented thoughtfully, it was strange enough to earn many of the gods' attention, my own included. I watched him as he learned about the new world he was brought to, how quickly he adapted to the strange machines and tools used by mortals today, but then there was one significant moment that really grabbed my attention. What happened? Tyson asked curiously as he wiped his hands on a napkin. Like the others gathered around the table, he was sucked into the story, curious about the kind blonde that gave him challenges in the forge. He found a girl on her own in California, Hera said while looking at a surprised Annabeth, a daughter of Athena, in fact. A young girl he treated like a sister, who he cared for and protected. The compassion, the care, oh, the familial bond. It warmed my heart to see a hero like that. Even Hestia showed more interest in him than any hero that had come before. Then why are you helping me instead of him? Annabeth asked with a frown. You were his first anchor. You were the first demigod he had met, and in some way, shape or form, you were family, the first family he could be with here. You gave him a reason to stay and not try to return to the hidden lands. Hera smiled as she looked at the girl, and with that reason, he had become what he is today, one of the greatest heroes of this time. All because of one young girl and the bond they made. Why am I helping you, Annabeth Chase? The queen continued, not because I prefer you over him, or he doesn't need it, because Naruto would need all the help in the world for his quest. No, I am helping you because he would want me to. The group sat once again in stunned silence, the sandwich in Tyson's hand falling to his plate from his lax grip due to awe. Percy sat noticeably straighter, his green eyes twinkling in thought. What those thoughts were, Annabeth didn't know, but she knew that for all she wanted to refute Hera's reason to help, she couldn't. Naruto would choose her safety over his any day of the week, month, or year. It was his fault, his fatal flaw, he was too selfless. He'd gladly give his life if it meant the safety of others would be assured, putting the world on his shoulders and never asking anyone else to do the same. Oh, but he could be so much better, Hera sighed, breaking Annabeth's thoughts. What do you mean? Percy asked curiously. Naruto Uzumaki, the son of Apollo, think about it, Hera said with a bit of disappointment, eventually he'll become far too arrogant, too cocky. Annabeth's head snapped up and she glared at the queen, Naruto isn't like that. Not now, no, but perhaps in time, Hera said before scoffing, he's already inherited his father's more often than not poor choice in women. Hecate would be a better option for him. Perhaps even Taichi, Order knows she's liked the boy since he was young. He and Talia deserve to be together. Annabeth argued, her annoyance rising. It was like Hera was purposely trying her patience by pointing out things that weren't there. The daughter of Athena continued hotly, both of them were wrongly punished for something out of their control. Zeus had broken his oath on the Styx, Hera countered with a frown, Hades was more than welcome to enact punishment, especially after what had happened to his children's mother. Then why did he kill Naruto if he wasn't part of that? Questioned the blonde with tears burning at her eyes, restraining herself from screaming out what she really wanted to say, why did he take my big brother away from me? She was nearly crying. Crying in front of Percy, Grover, and Tyson was one thing, crying in front of Hera of all things was definitely out of the question. But it was the one question that had bothered her for so long, haunted her since she was a child. Why her brother? Why did Naruto have to leave? Annabeth clenched tightly onto her jeans to keep her composure, her jaw trembling as Hera stared at her. Naruto made his choice, Annabeth, the queen said, a choice that only one Olympian has come close to ever making, he chose your life over his. Annabeth's hands clenched even tighter while she struggled to keep herself composed. Before she could ask anything else, Hera continued, but enough about Apollo's child, let's get back on track. I am here to help you, and to do so I will grant you one wish. Annabeth took a few deep breaths, pushing back her frustration before putting her mind to the quest at hand. What was their current situation? They were trapped in an ever-changing labyrinth to find its creator. However, there was also the possibility of more monsters being found in the labyrinth, so maybe a way to defeat them. Before you make your wish, I have some advice to give you, Hera spoke once more. You seek Daedalus, this labyrinth's creator. Finding Daedalus isn't going to be as easy as stumbling across him by chance. My advice is to go to my son Hephaestus. He'll be more than happy to help you discover what had happened to the inventor. But how do we get there? Annabeth asked before nodding in confirmation. That's what I wish for, a way to navigate the labyrinth. Hera gained a look of disappointment as she looked at Annabeth. I see. Unfortunately, you have wished for something you already have. Annabeth growled, something we already have. What was she talking about? Let it go, she was probably just trying to throw you off your game, Percy suggested before he walked into a stop. Tyson, ow. Tyson, what's the hold-up? Not alone, the Cyclops mumbled with a shiver, someone watching us. Grover stopped and sniffed before he shivered as well. He's right. Someone is watching us. Grow over, Tiwai-san. It is I, the Guhust King. A disembodied voice echoed around them, and I have come for your souls. As Tyson and Grover became even more unnerved, Percy snickered at the ghostly taunt while Annabeth's brow furrowed. The daughter of Athena muttered, I know that voice. Fear me. The voice continued before it broke into snickers. All right, come out Nico, Annabeth said with a frown on her face, you're scaring Tyson. Out of the shadows stepped a familiar olive-skinned 11-year-old. Nico D'Angelo had a smile on his face as he walked up to the group, dark eyes twinkling in the mischievous manner that Naruto often inspired. He wore a plain green shirt and jeans with a chain belt around his waist. Protecting him from the elements was a faded aviator's jacket, and slung over his shoulders was a decently sized sword about 3 feet in length, just shy of touching the ground from the 11-year-old's height. You should have seen the look on your face, sniggered out the boy to the relieved Tyson and the annoyed Grover. Shouldn't you be at camp taking care of Bianca? Grover inquired. Nico's smile fell into a frown. That's why I'm here, Nico retorted, my sister isn't getting better and I'm not going to sit around waiting for her to die while I could do something. Besides, Bianca is in good hands with Will. So you want to join us? Annabeth pieced together, to help your sister. I might find a way to save Bianca, Nico said determinedly, she's my most precious person. Strength comes from protecting your precious people, Annabeth quoted with a small smile, getting a grin from the younger boy. She hummed before saying, well I guess having another child of the big three would be a great help. I don't know, Percy uneasily said as he looked to Annabeth, Naruto would kill us if he got hurt. You mean he might kill you, Annabeth teased getting a mocking laugh from the son of Poseidon. Grover patted his friend on the shoulder in understanding while Tyson tilted his head in confusion. I can take care of myself, Nico said with a frown. To demonstrate, he turned around and raised his hand in the direction of the labyrinth, closing his eyes and forcing the ground to rise up. Opening his eyes, Nico then made the lifted slab float over to him with a gesture. As the slab stood in front of him, Nico unsheathed his slate-colored blade and slashed through the earth several times. He sheathed his sword and the raised stone crumbled. Geokinesis and swordsmanship, Annabeth summed up, as well as that, invisibility. Shadowwalking, Nico corrected as he gave a small smug grin to Percy, Dad taught me. When did he? Last winter, Percy concluded before crossing his arms as he scrutinized the younger boy, well at least you can swing your sword, but so can I. Can you use it though? Bianca and I were trained by one of, if not, the best swordswoman in the underworld, the son of Hades said with a challenging gleam in his eye. Training and surviving are two entirely different things, Percy countered. It's the same thing if you trained like we did, deadpanned the younger D'Angelo. He then shuddered as he remembered a cackling red-headed woman swinging a sword down at him, forcing him to go on the defensive. That training was not something he wanted to go through again. Who trained you? Grover asked curiously. Naruto's mom, Kushina Uzumaki, Nico replied nonchalantly. You could hear a pin drop after the son of Hades spoke. Annabeth was the first to speak, pouncing after she had recovered from her shock. You met Naruto's mom? Exclaimed the blonde daughter of Athena with a hint of jealousy to her voice. After he returned and Annabeth had asked him, Naruto had said he'd met her once but left it at that. Few knew more about his mother. Annabeth only knew his mother's name and what she looked like from a vague description, red-headed and beautiful. Annabeth then got rolling on the questions. What's she like? Why was she in the underworld? Why was she training you? How was she training you? Wow, you are worse than a journalist, Nico mumbled before he rubbed his arm. Well, yeah. She's my stepmother's handmaiden, bodyguard. It was hard not to meet Kushina. But what is she like? Annabeth pressed. Is she as nice as Naruto said she was? Kushina is the nicest woman I've ever met, Nico answered with a grin. I'll tell you more about her if I can come along. Sure, Annabeth agreed. It's not like I'm going to send you back through the labyrinth on your own. It's a miracle you even found us in the first place. Yeah, miracle. Percy repeated quietly as his eyes narrowed in suspicion. Not really, Nico dissuaded the teen's thoughts. I can sort of become the shadows. I see what they see. Different from Naruto's teleporting. How is that different from Naruto's teleporting? Annabeth asked. I thought he just jumped from place to place. Kind of, it's like he can vanish into thin air and in milliseconds reappear where he wants to, Nico struggled to explain. I don't know the technicalities, but he has a further range than Bianca or I do. Even our dad can't move as quickly through the shadows. That might be due to old age, though, Percy joked, getting a small bout of laughter from the group. Annabeth smiled at Nico and said, all right, let's get a move on then. Bianca won't wait forever and neither will Hephaestus. Hephaestus, huh? Nico mused, never met him. He made Kushina's sword after a request from Persephone. Dad made mine and Bianca's. Bianca has a sword? Percy asked. Annabeth rolled her eyes, seaweed brain, she has to defend herself somehow, and Nico even said that Kushina had trained both of them. Well, excuse me for not being a year-rounder, grumbled the son of Poseidon, how am I supposed to know? There's nothing against the occasional visit, Percy, Grover mock-chided, how are we supposed to be sure that you're okay? You're a riot. I've been taking lessons, Grover replied proudly, Juniper likes funny guys. While Percy and Grover, and the unintentionally eavesdropping Tyson, talked about Grover's girlfriend like how they met and how they hooked up, Annabeth grilled Nico for information on Naruto's mother. Kushina Uzumaki is the nicest woman outside of battle, Nico said as he walked next to the blonde. He shuddered in fear as he continued, training though, you trained with Naruto, right? Annabeth gave him a sympathetic glance, that bad? Worse, Nico muttered, getting Annabeth to wince. She hadn't known that there was someone more intense than Naruto when it came to training. The son of Hades continued, we were forced to run the length of the Styx twice. She managed to stick bones to our back and sicked Cerberus on us. How did you survive? Asked the daughter of Athena. Running. A lot of running, Nico answered. He shook off the memories and said, other than that, Kushina was very nice. A few conversations with Apollo over the phone that Bianca and I overheard aside, I don't think she gets mad that easily. What were she and Apollo arguing about? Annabeth inquired. I don't think they were arguing, said the boy with a shrug. According to Bianca, she was just accusing him of tainting her precious baby boy, whatever that meant. Really? Annabeth probed as a small smirk crossed her face. What else? She kept warning me to stay away from alcohol and drugs for some reason other than the usual, drugs are bad, stay in school, thing, Nico said, before grinning. There's a really good story she told me about Naruto though. Did you know he once led a revolt? No way! Exclaimed the girl with a frown, why wouldn't he tell me that? It is kind of graphic for a kid who already has to deal with monsters chasing them, Nico pointed out, getting a look of surprise from Annabeth. What? Kushina told me about how you two met. I guess Naruto must have told her, Annabeth mumbled. But anyway, Naruto and his team were called out to escort a bridge builder to a small village called Nami, Nico began, enthralling the daughter of Athena with the story. Percy, Tyson and Grover were sucked in as well, silently listening in as the son of Hades spoke. Annabeth interjected a lot, asking questions about details Nico wasn't 100% sure of, such as how two fully grown men hid in a puddle, or how a rabbit that was out of its natural habitat retained a snow-white fur, or even how a blade nearly 6 feet in length that was stopped by a blade 5 inches long. The group shared a laugh when Nico retold how Naruto freaked out upon discovering he had been stabbed with a poisonous blade, and then making it worse by impaling his hand with his kunai. As he talked about their tree-climbing exercise, the subject of Sasuke came up, making Grover and Percy share a glance before the son of Poseidon interrupted, "Who is Sasuke?" Sasuke, Nico corrected, was Naruto's best friend, before he went crazy and tried to kill him. Annabeth, Percy and Grover stiffened before looking at one another. Nico continued to walk and talk, Tyson following him while engrossed in the story, leaving the three behind. Grover leaned forward and asked, "You don't think that?" He did say Lucky Boy was almost impaled through the heart by the psychopathic friend, Percy said as he recalled the mockery of a story Naruto had told last winter. But even with Apollo's blessing, which he didn't even know about until he was 15, Annabeth pointed out, Naruto couldn't have survived a punctured lung. Not without some serious medical treatment. Q could have helped, Grover suggested, he was a spirit of nature after all, and some spirits are known to be well trained in the arts of healing. But Q was a curse before he became a weapon, Percy argued, Naruto was one of those, cheeky things. Jinchuriki, Grover corrected. What did you say? Annabeth asked as her eyes widened. Grover and Percy looked at each other before back at her as she continued, Jinchuriki? As in, power of human sacrifice? You learned Japanese, didn't you? Grover asked. It's my third language, nodded a proud Annabeth. I can barely handle English and you learn Japanese? Percy asked incredulously. Annabeth rolled her eyes. Japanese to Greek translation books, seaweed brain, replied the blonde as though it were obvious, you'd be surprised how easy learning things can be once you translate it to Greek. Shut up, wise girl, Percy mumbled as he looked away, recalling Naruto saying something similar as he forced Percy to study history. Anyway, it's an old word long forgotten, how do you two know it? Annabeth asked. Grover and Percy shared another nervous glance, this one noticed by Annabeth and making her gape at them, no. No, he didn't. He told you about his past on the quest for Artemis, didn't he? Yes/no. I mean no/yes. The two friends replied before glaring at each other, would it kill you for once in your life to work with me? You two have been together for far too long, Annabeth commented before starting to rant, I can't believe he told you to. I thought he hated you, Percy. Same here, answered the boy honestly, I think if it weren't for Talia, we'd have never gotten the truth out of him. But he told you. You. Why hasn't he said anything to me yet? Annabeth demanded, feeling slightly hurt. Maybe there's a reason he hasn't told you yet, Grover quickly defended the blonde, maybe he thinks by keeping you in the dark he's keeping you safe. It sounds like him, Percy admitted, thinking back to what Apollo said to him on the train, I mean, he picked on me to get me to wake up and take things seriously. Which you still haven't done, Grover added. Who's the demigod again? Percy playfully threatened. Last I checked you were, and yet I still managed to make you walk into a tree, retorted the satyr with a smug grin. Touché, Percy stated before putting a hand on the lightly smiling Annabeth's shoulder and said, listen, Naruto has the most messed up logic on the planet. You of all people should know that by now. Whatever his reason for not telling you, it's most likely for your benefit. You really think so? Annabeth asked. Yep, Percy lied slightly. He wasn't really sure about that, though, because there was still a, very slim, possibility that Naruto just forgot to bring his little sis up to speed. For now, he'll just try to keep Annabeth's mind on the quest and keep her from feeling too low or doubting herself. Thanks Percy, the daughter of Athena said with that same smile that made Percy's heart skip a beat. The dark-haired teen just smiled back, content with making his crush feel better. Hey, are you guys coming or what? Nico called from a rather impressive distance ahead. The three older quest takers quickly rejoined the two younger ones, Nico giving them odd looks upon their arrival. What were you guys talking about? Nothing important, Annabeth replied, what did we miss? Team made it to wave Naruto met Haku, Tyson summed up with a smile, go on, Nico. Tell more. Yeah, Nico waved off the excited Cyclops urging, apparently Naruto was out all the next night training, oversleeping and missing his team leave for the bridge. He was gone just long enough to hear his host Tsunami, the bridge builder's daughter, release a threatening yell to bite her own tongue off after he stumbled across a cut-up boar. Is that possible? Percy asked. Annabeth shuddered before nodding, prompting the others to groan in disgust at the mental image. Not only possible, but life-threatening, Nico answered nonchalantly, but anyway, Naruto uses his duplication thing. Kage Bunshin, Annabeth said, remembering the technique that had more often than not saved their hides. Yeah, that, Nico said. He used the Kage Bunshin and took out 2 mercenaries that were hired to capture the bridge builder's family. He gave an inspiring speech to the builder's grandson, which led to the kid running around the village begging others to rise up against Gato. Nico then grinned. The best part is what came afterwards. Apparently, after Naruto's team left, the village named the bridge after him. They called it the Naruto Ohashi, in honor of their hero. The Great Naruto Bridge, Annabeth translated loosely in awe and a bit of jealousy. No way, Grover said in disbelief. How come Naruto didn't tell us about this? I don't think he knew, Nico said. Kushina told me she had discovered it by accident while exploring the underworld. She met a man she never expected in a million years to be down there. What was the man's name? Percy asked out of curiosity. Nico shrugged before he gave his answer. I dunno. All she kept calling him was Erosenin or perverted toad. The 5 continued to walk until they came across another exit. As they left the labyrinth for the second time on their quest, the world around them had changed, not that they knew it. Days had passed during Nico's tale rather than minutes. And in the past few days, many things had happened for the other quest takers, including the reveal of a secret regrettably kept from someone who deserved to know it. Chapter 10. This isn't over, Namikaze. Snarled Kiba as he, a whimpering and muzzled Akamaru as well as a frowning Shikamaru were marched into the camp. Along with the bronze chains, chakra restraining tags were placed along their body. A good-sized amount of tags were given to small squads sent to retrieve Choji alive under Jason's order. It's Uzumaki, Naruto corrected as he shoved the bound Kiba forward. Now keep moving, Kibble breath. The members of the 5th cohort who had been around when Naruto was at Jupiter 5 years ago were all delighted to see their former member, including the hyperactive Kool-Aid addict that was their senior centurion, Dakota. Though, Dakota was saddened to learn it was one of his kin that had threatened the camp. He had personally volunteered to go and retrieve Choji from where he had landed. At the sound of armor clanking upon becoming straight and disciplined, Naruto turned to see more familiar faces, one in particular causing his face to split into a wide grin. Ray-chan! He exclaimed joyfully, abandoning his post and escorting the new prisoners to greet the girl. Scowls from the other ready cohorts showed their disapproval at the informal greeting, while others, mostly those from the 5th, fought back laughter at the normally stoic girl giving a small smile to the blonde. Naruto Uzumaki, she greeted before clearing her throat and giving him an expectant look. Jason slipped over to her side, his smile dimming to a serious brood that looked almost forced. Naruto sheepishly chuckled before standing at attention, crossing his right arm over his chest with a fist on his left pectoral. He bowed forward slightly as he spoke. Praetors of Camp Jupiter, thank you for the timely assist and housing my company. Rise and be welcomed, Jason and Reina said together. Naruto gave them another smile before his eyes landed on Taliya, who was staring at the other blonde in the small group. Taking a deep breath, Naruto then said, Reina, if you don't mind, I need to borrow Jason for a little bit. I suppose I can allow it, Reina replied with a hint of disappointment. I'll make sure the prisoners are properly secured. Alive as well, Jason said with a frown. I still don't understand your reasoning, Naruto. I'll explain it later, the older blonde said as Reina left to ensure the prisoners would be properly taken care of, short of death. Naruto looked at other members of the Legion, before looking back to Jason and asking, think you can get them to leave us alone for like, 5-10 minutes? I am a praetor, Jason reminded the blonde. PSH, since when? Jokingly replied the older teen. Jason rolled his eyes before issuing an order to return to camp, while Naruto went to Taliya and Piper. Naruto, Is that? Taliya was at a loss for words as she watched the blonde teen issue commands. Above her the sky darkened slowly. It is, confirmed the older blonde before he stepped to the side as Jason returned. Jason Grace, praetor of Camp Jupiter. Meet my companions, first, Piper McLean. Hello, Jason greeted with an offered hand and a smile. As Piper took his hand, Jason stared into her kaleidoscopic eyes in awe for a brief moment, snapping out of it when she spoke. Nice to meet you, Piper returned with her own grin before Naruto cleared his throat. The two younger teens released each other's hands and looked to the blonde. Naruto then looked to the raven-haired girl, her blue eyes misting slightly and biting her lip like she wanted to keep from crying. Jason followed Naruto's gaze, and when his eyes locked with the older girl's, he felt something akin to familiarity. As a tear rolled down the raven-haired girl's cheek, Jason felt the urge to make her smile as the clouds gathered overhead. Jason, I promised you a long time ago that I would reunite you with your sister, Naruto began, moving to stand behind Jason and looking at the girl as rain began to fall. Jason, meet Talia Grace, the daughter of Zeus. Talia-chan, say hello to your little brother, Jason Grace, the son of Jupiter. Jason and Talia stared at each other for a moment before one of them moved. Jason nearly fell over when Talia bowled into him, wrapping her arms around him tightly, and tears falling down her cheeks. Jason failed to speak as Talia cried while hugging him and repeated two words, "You're real." "Why yeah." Jason finally managed to say as he hugged her back, tears of his own starting to form as he choked out, I am real." Naruto and Piper watched the two siblings interact, the younger demigoddess moving to stand to the blonde side in an effort to become shielded from falling water. She looked up at the older teen, nudging him in the side and getting his attention. "Did you really promise him to reunite him with his sister?" Naruto didn't reply for a moment, his smile dying and his eyes becoming sad. "Yeah." "Wow, you should work for Hallmark," Piper commented with a small smile. Naruto's mouth twitched upwards at the joke. Unnoticed in the rain, his sunny sky blue eyes remained a depressed shade of blue as he watched the two children of the woman named Grace reunite. Talia's closed eyes opened once more and locked with her boyfriend's through the rain. A second passed and Naruto prepared himself as he saw the connections start to be made. Her brow furrowed in confusion before narrowing in anger. Forcing herself out of Jason's grasp, Talia pushed past with a glare meeting Naruto's eyes. "You son of a bitch," she hissed as she approached him. There was a boom of thunder and Talia gave her boyfriend an accusing finger. "You knew. You knew and you didn't tell me." Naruto said nothing, his sad smile matching the emotions in his eyes. Talia continued to glare at him before storming off in the other direction without another word being said. Jason found himself once more searching for words, looking between his leaving sister and his friend. Naruto nodded once, a silent instruction sending the younger blonde after his furious older sister. What just happened?" Piper asked, looking up at Naruto. Is she mad at you?" "Yeah." Naruto sighed out, wiping water from his eyes, furious if I'm reading the wind speed right. "But, she didn't hit you?" "Nope." "Doesn't she normally?" "Yep." "Is that bad?" "For you?" "No." "For me?" Naruto left the question be unanswered and after a moment he turned towards the camp. "Come on. Let's go talk to Rei-chan." "Rei-chan? What? Is she an ex-girlfriend or something?" Piper asked, making note of the suffix he used. "Nope," Naruto said as they walked away from the storm. "Talia. Talia, wait up." Jason called out to his still storming away sister, clouds gathering above her as she marched. He groaned before shooting ahead in a burst of speed, stopping in front of her as he doubles over and pants, Just give me a second." Recovering his breath from the forced application of the wind rather than the proper method he had been using, Jason asked as he stood upright, "What did Naruto do?" "What did he do?" He fucking lied to my face." Talia had tears of rage, depression and joy being held back by sheer will. "He knew you were alive and kept me in the dark." "Me? I thought we were past all that, but he is still keeping secrets from me." "So?" "Everyone's got secrets," Jason replied in confusion. "You don't keep your girlfriend's brother still being alive a secret, Jason." Talia shouted, causing a bolt of lightning to crash down nearby. Jason's mouth moved but no words came out. Finally, he managed a surprised, "Girlfriend?" "Not for much longer," exploded the raven-haired demigoddess along with a boom of thunder. "Well, I don't know how to reply to that," admitted the praetor, "but this can't be how you want to end it." "You'd be surprised," retorted Talia as the rain started to pour down harshly, reflecting her emotions. Jason was starting to have trouble determining which droplets were tears and which were from the sky. "There has to be a reason why he kept it from you," Jason said, nearly shouting, as the wind picked up. He could suppose this was why Lupa would send him outside when he would have temper tantrums. "I had a right to know that my little brother was still alive." "You did," agreed the younger Grace, "you had every right to know." But Naruto had a reason. He always has a reason for what he does." "So what? My feelings don't matter." Talia raged, "Just his bullshit reason. He brought you along when he knew he'd end up here, right?" Jason asked, making Talia blink. "What does that tell you?" "He promised to reunite me with my sister and look what he did." Sure, it took some time, but kept his promise to me. I still had a right to know. Taliah argued. Maybe something was keeping him from telling you. Jason retorted, Naruto wouldn't keep this from you unless something made him do so. Give him a chance to explain himself and he will. What do you know? The older sister demanded. I know that he missed you. Jason said, making her stare at him in disbelief. The blonde pressed on, yeah, all he talked about was you and his sister. She's around my age apparently and her name was, Annabelle. Annabeth, Taliah corrected, getting Jason to nod. Okay, Annabeth, amended the blonde, the point is he wouldn't shut up about you. He was always smiling when he talked about you too. I was also curious what you were like, so he told me things. Like how much you love to practice with your control over lightning, especially on him since he doesn't like it. Taliah smirked as she recalled the small shocks she used to give the blonde as they traveled. The way he would yelp and jump behind Annabeth while Luke would tease the older boy, who'd then retaliate with a wedgie or noogie or something along those lines. And then the way you two would, well, talk, Jason said while shuffling where he stood as the rain slowed, the way you'd speculate over what would come after you next. When he talked about you, he just seemed so happy, he spoke with such affection, you know. Taliah's smirk fell into a soft smile. More than once she and Naruto would lie under the stars looking up, wondering how their fathers acted, what the safe place for demigods was. Sharing a few nights alone on watch for monsters, the way she'd wake up in his embrace after some long nights. More recent events entered her mind, fighting Layden along with Zoe, their dance at Christmas, the more embarrassing conclusions to their training sessions, and some of their date nights. Then he'd go on about how you always had this smirk, how your nose scrunched up when you'd get mad, how you woke up more than once lying on his shoulder. Jason rambled before pointing at his now scowling sister, that's the scrunched up, oh. I think I get the point, the slightly embarrassed girl said before looking up at the sky, I hate losing control like that. You just needed to calm down, Jason corrected as he held his hand out. Wind gathered in it and started to form a sphere, once you're calm, you can do anything. He helped you gain control, too, and impressed Taliah mused before raising a fist and having lightning spark around it, lightning's way more fun, though. You can fly with wind, Jason countered with a smirk. Taliah's own grin fell slightly, yeah, flying. What? Can't fly yet? Jason started to tease before he remembered something and he winced, right, acrophobia. You know, I've been wondering how is that even possible, I mean our father is Dash. Shut up, Jason. Taliah said with a small frown that could be mistaken for a pout. Jason grinned, you're the daughter of Zeus, but afraid of heights. I will shock you, Taliah warned. It wouldn't hurt me, deadpanned the younger Grace, earning a glare from his sister. I'm sorry, for a second I mistook you for the other blonde, Taliah snarked. The two siblings stood across from one another, eyes narrowed challengingly at the other before they grinned. They hugged again and after a minute, Jason asked in a hopeful tone, so, gonna go forgive Naruto, yet? No, Taliah replied with a frown before asking, can we talk about something else? I guess, Jason said in a slightly defeated tone before asking, so, how was life as a tree? They refused to tell us anything, Reina said with a scowl as she, Naruto and Piper stood outside of a holding cell. Naruto was leaning against the side of the bars, glaring into the cell at the meditating Shikamaru. The blonde's eyes narrowed in thought. Do you really have to lock the dog up with a muzzle? Piper asked as she looked at the giant white dog. Normally, no, Naruto said, breaking himself from his musings, but he's learned to speak. One less annoyance. Fuck you, Naruto. Kiba snarled as he glared down at his shackled hands and the tags attached to it. While many may pay to see it, I'm going to have to pass on the request, Naruto replied before returning his gaze to Shikamaru, you can't escape. Our leaders won't allow it. A girl in shiny armor and another pretty boy. Kiba was cut off by Shikamaru's voice. They're not who he's talking about, replied the meditating teen as his coal eyes looked up and met two sun-filled sapphire orbs, something far more powerful is at play here. Understatement of the millennia, Naruto mumbled. Looking back to Reina, the blonde said, they're not going to talk. How can you be sure? The praetor asked. The only way that we would get anything is if they told us willingly, replied the blonde before an idea struck him. Looking at Piper, Naruto said, Piper, come here. Why? She asked. I got an idea, the blonde replied, ask the mutt what their plan is. What? Both Piper and Reina chorused. Fuck you, Naruto. We've been over this, Naruto said to the shinobi before looking back at Piper, in the nicest, sweetest and most polite manner. Ask him what their plan is. Why should I? Piper inquired as she stepped closer to the cell. Naruto rolled his eyes. Because then you would be helpful, I might get an idea as to who your mother is. Would you like me to continue? Fine, agreed the girl before looking at the wild-looking man. Smiling in a sincerely sweet smile, Piper asked Kiba, what is your plan? Bust out as soon as possible, subdue Naruto and drag his traitorous ass back to Konoha for trial and to retrieve a blood sample so that the Alliance can use his parents' notes in the Fourth Shinobi War, Kiba answered. Shikamaru looked at him in pure shock while Akamaru growled something in the canine language. Yeah, figured as much, Naruto sighed out while Kiba rubbed his head. Looking at Piper, Naruto grinned, congrats are in order, your mom is the ultimate manipulator, the Lady of Doves and the fairest of them all. First 3 guesses don't count. As Piper furrowed her brow in confusion, Shikamaru stood and pulled Kiba away from the bars. Glaring at Naruto, the squad leader asked, how did she do that? Kibs is a pervert, he couldn't resist her girlish charms, Naruto replied as he gently pulled Piper away from the cell and stood in front of her, she might be able to ensnare you, too. Bullshit, snapped Shikamaru, what sort of Kekii Genkai does she have? Who are the people in charge and where the fuck did you get the strength to flip Choji when he was over 100 feet tall? What you think I'm just going to tell you? Naruto asked with a smirk, like the old me would've? Like an idiot would? Well, here's a newsflash, Shikamaru. There was a squelching sound and Shikamaru's eyes widened before he looked down and saw a kunai piercing his leg. The dark eyes looked up into the sun-encircled blue ones. Shikamaru's gaze was filled with betrayal and confusion while Naruto's were filled with anger. Another squelch was heard and Shikamaru stumbled back, clutching his leg and gritting his teeth. I'm not the dope you can push around or poke fun at, just like you're not the same sarcastic lazy son of a bitch you were all those years ago, Naruto informed the man with accusing eyes. I'll kill you, Naruto. The weak voice of the newest occupant said as members of Jupiter's Legion entered. Naruto turned and his gaze softened as the slightly charred body of his childhood friend was carried in. Before he could speak, Reina stopped the entourage and glared down at the wounded man. Be silent, the young warrior scolded, you've shamed both this camp and your ancestry, at least hold the decency not to disgrace yourself further. He doesn't even know what you're talking about, interjected the blonde demigod as he placed a hand on Choji's head, ignoring the glare he received. Closing his eyes, Naruto softly spoke, kind father above, show my foe some love, ensure the pain goes away, I will never turn astray. There was a small bright light from where Naruto's hand pressed against Choji's head. Choji felt the pains of his burns dim to nothing, making him look at Naruto questionably. Patting the large man on the head, Naruto said, for burning you alive, I am sorry, Choji. Stabbing someone and flaying someone are 2 different things. Choji said nothing, falling into a blissful sleep as he was moved into an adjacent cell. Naruto's eyes followed his old friend before looking back to Shikamaru, who was frowning as he tried to figure out what had just happened. You can keep plotting all you like, Konohan, Naruto said with a bit of disgust, I'll be waiting. You can't keep us down here forever, Naruto. Kiba called after the blonde as he and the 2 girls left the cells, I will get you for this. Naruto. When Jason offered to show her around the very different Camp Jupiter, Talia hadn't expected to run into her boyfriend and their younger companion being led around by the other praetor, Reina. With her armor off and wearing a bright purple tunic, Reina was a rather beautiful girl of Hispanic descent with hair nearly as dark as Talia's own. She stood at Naruto's shoulder, putting her a good few inches shorter than herself and her equally tall, and still growing, brother. Talia-chan, Naruto greeted with a nod as well as a small smile. Talia nodded curtly to him and Piper before looking expectantly at the other praetor, to which Naruto introduced them, Rei-chan, this is my girlfriend Talia Grace, Jason's sister and daughter of Zeus. Talia, this is Reina, daughter of Bellona the Roman war goddess. Talia noticed that something flashed across Reina's eyes and that the praetor's eyebrows narrowed slightly when Naruto called her his girlfriend, but her face quickly turned into a small smile, welcome to Camp Jupiter, Talia Grace. Just Talia will do, the raven-haired daughter of Zeus as she returned the smile half-heartedly. It was exactly what she needed right now, a girl with a crush on her idiot. And judging on the pleased grin spreading across Naruto's face, he wasn't even aware of it. Fantastic. Addressing said idiot, Talia asked, so who are our followers? Couple of guys from my hometown inviting me to a party, Naruto said. Piper scoffed, more like they were here to drag you to your ordered execution. Well, thanks for having my back, Pipes. Naruto chirped sarcastically as Taliah narrowed her eyes on him. In order to appease his girlfriend, Naruto was quick to add, look, it's nothing to worry about. I sealed off their chakra and Rei-chan has them all under guard by members of the first cohort, some of the best fighters in the Legion. Who did you assign? Jason asked, getting Reina to look at him. Just Marshall and Douglas, Reina answered, we already have them locked up and as Naruto said, he sealed away their chakra. Chakra, corrected the blonde. Naruto opened his mouth to continue when another voice spoke up. How dare you show your face here? Wonderful, just the person I didn't want to see, Naruto snarked before turning to glare at the newcomer. He was a pale skinny teen just about Taliah's height, with equally pale blonde hair and crazed blue eyes that were narrowed onto Naruto's form. A white toga hung over a plain blue shirt and jeans. Taliah noted that there was a tattoo on his arm, of a lyre above the letters SPQR with 5 lines underneath it. Flanking him were 2 Roman campers with spears at the ready. You and your Greek ideology. The teen said, not to mention bringing enemies into the camp. Apprehend them. Lower your weapons, Jason ordered the 2 before glaring at the newcomer, and you stay out of this, Octavian. Your compassion blinds you, Jason. The teen, Octavian, accused, you acquaint yourself with the enemy. Oh, shove it up your ass, Octi, Naruto sneered, why don't you go play with your stuffed animals? You dare insult the augur of Jupiter? Octavian asked. Oh, that is bull. Shit. Helios raged, this little twat wouldn't know the difference between a fortune cookie and a prophecy if it slapped him in the face. Augur my ass. Naruto snapped, taking a step towards Octavian as Helios' feelings on the matter influenced him, you're nothing more than a haruspex. The augur looked like an apple, he was so red, you son of a dash. Finish that sentence and even the gods won't save you from my wrath, Octavian. Naruto warned the teen with murder in his eyes. If there was one thing Naruto disliked above all else in this camp, it was the great times however many generations nephew that stood before him. The 2 blonde descendants of Apollo held murderous gazes while Octavian's guards nervously looked between the 2. Alright, that's enough. Reina announced, stepping between the 2 with a scowl set on her face. She turned to Naruto first, as much as it pains me to admit it, Octavian has a point. You are a guest, do not show hostility to my people. Reina then turned to Octavian, and you, Octavian, have no right in choosing who is and isn't allowed in our camp. Now return to your duties or I will have you arrested for attacking a foreign diplomat. You don't have the right dash. Octavian began, only for Jason to step forward. You not only threatened our guests, Octavian, but my sister as well. Jason snarled, who happens to also be the daughter of Zeus. What does that tell you? Octavian promptly shut up, looking as though he just swallowed something sour, sending another sneering glare to Naruto. The look was returned with one of restrained anger, part of it was influenced by Helios' opinion and of Naruto's own dislike for the teen. Octavian held his gaze for a moment longer before retreating. Naruto's eyes narrowed and he grumbled, how the fuck did that come from my dad? Don't let him get to you, Reina said to the blonde, placing a hand on his arm, he was trying to get you to react. Yeah, and he almost got his wish, the older demigod muttered angrily. He turned around and walked away, interlocking his hands behind his head as he did, well, we gonna get some food soon? I thought you guys would have added a restaurant while I was gone. You're a riot, Naruto, Jason replied as his eyes rolled. As Reina and Piper followed after the son of Apollo, he nudged Taliah and asked, you wanna go with them? We might not have a restaurant but we've got some pretty good food at the barracks. This place sounds more like a boot camp than a summer camp, Taliah murmured with her eyes narrowed as she watched Reina gently touch Naruto's arm to gain his attention. Mad as she might be at her boyfriend, she wasn't about to let some crushing girl try to take him away. Looking at her brother and forcing down her anger, Taliah gave him a small smile, sure. Later that evening, Shikamaru found himself staring up at the roof of his cell. Kiba had tired himself out trying to force one of their armored guards to release him under death threats. The guards merely spoke in another language before laughing as their relief came in. Upon being asked what language they were speaking, he was told nothing. Choji floated in and out of consciousness. Whatever Naruto did, he made it possible for Choji to slowly recover, if what one of their guards said in English was anything to go by. It made the heir to the Nara clan think about what Naruto had said to him. You can't take me home, I am home. That's it for part 10. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.